Welcome back, YouTube. Today's question is actually going to be two general questions that I get a lot about plant-based or vegan diets and the carnivore diet. Now, these are easily the most popular questions that I get around nutrition, with people asking about different camps of dieting. It's normally quite broad like this, where people don't even ask anything specifically. It's more so just a general thoughts around diet X, Y, or Z. So this can also be extended to other diets like ketogenic diets, pescatarian or paleo or breatharians or whatever other diets happen to pop up in the future that somebody decides to attach a label to and mark it as the next big thing to unlock your health and give you the body of your dreams. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on this general diet topic. So if you've ever followed like a ketogenic diet or a plant-based diet, or you're a carnivore or paleo or any other diet at all like this and found it to be helpful or even not beneficial at all, drop me a comment below to let me know why you started it and how you responded to it. Now, I do think it's important when talking about any kind of dieting plan, especially vegan or plant-based diets, I think it's really important to give a little bit of context. I don't really know what it is, but people seem to get really culty and opinionated, and probably most annoyingly of all, self-righteous around different types of diets, especially plant-based diets. Look, it happens with every diet, honestly, but for whatever reason, people really seem to have a strong identity attachment to eating plant-based. I can understand it to a degree. There's a lot of ethics and sustainability and health arguments that can be made around a plant-based diet, or any diet in general for that matter, and that's where I think there's a lot of blurred lines and miscommunication and arguing that goes on amongst all these different dieting methodologies. A lot of people are bringing topics of health up when the other person could be talking about sustainability or ethics or something else altogether. Now, I personally am not educated enough to really have a strong stance on the ethical side or the sustainability side of things with respect to different diet plans, but I do have a bit that I can mention around the health side of things from a nutritional standpoint. So I'm going to center a lot of my reasoning and this whole video and my thoughts around that. If you want to share your thoughts and ideas and opinions on anything of like health or ethics or sustainability, feel free to do that in the comment section below, of course, but just try to keep things respectful in here. I know that there's a lot of very strong viewpoints and opinions around all of this kind of stuff, as it is always going to be a very controversial topic, but there's no need to start slinging abuse just for the sake of it. If you have something constructive to say or want to learn, do it with an open mind and just listen respectfully. Anyway, let's talk about a lot of the issues that I have surrounding a lot of these different diets, whether it's vegan or carnivore or things like the Mediterranean diet, or paleo, or other super secret diets from ancient cultures that have only just been discovered as the fountain of youth. I'm sure you've all seen some sort of documentary or even seen maybe an authority figure like a handful of different doctors or athletes or celebrities talking about the benefits of a diet plan like being plant-based or raw or paleo or carnivorous, and these authority figures probably even gone to great lengths to talk about why their diet is superior based on the scientific research. So, for example, a little while ago, red meat was in the spotlight as being the worst thing you could eat for your body, as it would cause cancer or raise your blood pressure and cause you to burst into flames or something like that. It's hard to keep up these days. But then, more recently, it was hailed as being incredibly healthy and not an issue whatsoever. The same can be said for plant-based diets, with all sorts of findings of improved health markers or longevity or what else you can think of, and also a lot of negative outcomes as well. Importantly though, we need to understand that the vast majority of all the science and research that's done on diet plans is observational and epidemiological in nature. Now let me break that down for you in plain English. So when you hear about some new scientific research breakthrough, if you don't really know a lot about the scientific process, you might imagine it goes something along the lines of scientists getting a bunch of people and giving them steak or no steak or broccoli or no broccoli, and then they track everything else around their lifestyle and nutrition and see what sort of outcomes are measured across a long period of time from giving these people the steak or the broccoli, whatever else it may be. Then these researchers found that people who got the steak got cancer and died horrible, painful deaths, and as such we should now not eat meat. See, it doesn't actually work like that though. That's what you would call a randomized controlled trial. Now, instead of that, most of this research that's done on nutrition plans is pulling from observed trends in populations over a long period of time without being able to control much in terms of whether that person's eating steak or broccoli or anything like that whatsoever. It sounds kind of messy, right? We're trying to work out whether or not giving somebody a steak is going to cause their head to explode and their bowels to erupt, but we can't actually control whether or not we're giving people a steak or what kind of steak, how much of that steak they're having, and what else is being consumed with, or what else the person is doing or not doing in their life as they eat that steak. Now, unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. The logistics of doing that to a person or a large group of people in a population, where you'd be controlling every single perceivable variable, is unrealistic for nutrition sciences. And as such, we have to rely on these epidemiological or observational studies. So, what's the outcome of this? Yeah, a study might find that red meat is associated or correlated with an increase in cancer risk. But what type of red meat are we really talking about? And those people who had an increase in cancers or death or whatever it may be, what else were they doing? Were they physically active? Were they over-consuming or under-consuming calories? Were they smokers? Were they drinkers? Drug users? What kind of society were they living in? What else were they doing that may have contributed to this? It really doesn't give us anything concrete about what is going on in the body and if red meat is or is not to blame. But of course, it's a lot more interesting for news articles to report on the findings of a new study that show that meat is killing you or killing your gains. And it confirms the bias that a lot of different people have in these different nutrition tribes, and they'll start parroting it as well. And it creates a whole lot of overblown hype and arguing around something that should actually be quite straightforward. Now, interestingly, there was more recently a systematic review put out on red meat, which is pretty much the gold standard in terms of scientific research. It's where researchers combine the findings on as many different relevant studies as they can find on a specific topic and use it to form the best judgment on what the evidence suggests. And they found that after doing this with regards to red meat, there was very, very, very little evidence to suggest that we need to be reducing red meat intake. Now, the issue with epidemiological studies is that it's impossible to say with any real certainty what you should or should not be doing. These types of studies are useful for forming hypotheses that we might want to look further into using something like a randomized controlled trial, but that's about it. It's probably going to give us interesting food for thought, or for people then say, that's interesting. These people did have an increased risk of cancer. I wonder why that may be. What could the potential mechanism be there? How can I test it with a more specific setting in terms of controls to be able to work out what's really going on? But of course, the mass media and most people on social media won't ever share that with you. And a lot of the time, the journalists or social media influencers out there sharing this stuff, they don't even know the difference. So they're just going to share whatever fits in with their bias and their agenda. So let's cut through all of that and talk a little bit more about what are some of the facts and why I don't like to recommend any diet, whether it's plant-based or carnivorous or ketogenic or anything like that, as a general rule. There are always going to be specific it depends factors, but for the most part, there are a few unifying concepts that people need to understand when they're looking at embarking on any one of these types of diets. First of all, is that for many people, eating plant-based or carnivorous or ketogenic or paleo starts with a simple cut or elimination of certain foods. If you're plant-based, you just stop eating all meat foods and you're good. If you're carnivorous, you just cut out all plants. If you're ketogenic, cut out all carbs. And if you're paleo, cut out anything un-paleo, whatever that means these days anyway. And that's where problems start arising. Let's say, for example, you go plant-based. So you cut out all of your meat as a start. But then you realize, oh, hang on a sec, I want to be a bit more savvy, so maybe I'll start adding in more vegetables and plant stuff like legumes and lentils and nuts and seeds and tofu to try to hit my protein and calorie needs. Now, that is for sure better than a lot of people, but it still misses the mark, because there is never really a conversation being had around what my friend Ben Cant refers to as nutritional IQ, or the amount of knowledge you have around the food that you're eating. You see, when you're going from an omnivorous diet to a plant-based or a carnivorous or a paleo or a ketogenic diet or any other kind of diet altogether, a lot of the time, the diet is going to present to you with a new set of challenges that you need to overcome, and a whole lot of new skills you need in the kitchen and with preparation of your food that you need to learn about. Plant-based is a very, very simple one. See, when you remove meat from the diet, you expose yourself to potentially creating a lot of deficiencies in things like vitamin A, and iron, calcium, maybe choline, among many, many, many other things. So maybe you're a bit more savvy and you do a little bit of Googling and you realize, oh, it's okay. I can get the same amount of iron that I get from meat from eating spinach, or the same amount of calcium by eating more spinach or broccoli. But when you look into the actual bioavailability or the absorption rate of those nutrients from those foods compared to meat, it's a very different story. For example, you can eat spinach and get calcium from it, but you'll typically only absorb about 5% of the calcium that you'll see on a nutrition database. If you had broccoli instead, it'd be more like maybe 20%, which is definitely better. If you had a glass of milk, you'd be getting more like 30 to 40% absorption though. And that doesn't mean that I'm saying you have to drink cow's milk. Like, I personally don't drink cow's milk whatsoever. I never had it growing up. I never really liked it since. I can probably count on one hand how often I've had cow's milk in my entire life as like a glass of milk. I personally get most of my calcium needs through sardines, vegetables, and on occasion, other dairy products like yogurt and cheeses. But even then, my actual dairy intake is quite low. What I'm saying though, is that if you choose to eat plant-based, you need to be aware of these limitations that plants have and how to overcome them. You need to understand how to do things like sprouting or fermenting your food as a way to increase both nutrient quantity and the bioavailability of the nutrients from the food that you're eating. But unfortunately, most people aren't doing this when they're following a plant-based diet. Or they see it as too hard or expensive, or don't even have an awareness of how important this stuff really is. And that's where the issues lie. The top percent of people following a plant-based diet who have been doing so for years or decades and are thriving on it, they probably are doing this kind of stuff. But the majority of people who are doing this kind of diet, they aren't. And they're suffering for it as a result of this. So sure, if you were to switch over to a different eating style, chances are you might feel better in the initial phases because maybe you reduce calories or maybe you're being more adherent to a diet plan, have more confidence behind it in general. But it takes time for these issues to often manifest, for your body to start to have significant deficiencies, or for the effects of these deficiencies to accumulate over time. And that's where a few months into the diet, you start to realize your energy sucks, your sleep sucks, your mood sucks, you're always getting injured in the gym or tweaking something, and you're not improving or feeling as good as you used to. And then you read about some other diet fad to jump at based off another documentary or epidemiological study that was in the news, and you go headfirst straight into it. Now, I've focused a bit more on the plant-based diet in this little discussion, but the reality is that this is true for carnivorous diets, ketogenic diets, paleo diets, anything else that you can think of. All of these diets tend to be centered around the elimination of food groups and in a lot of cases whole macronutrients. They all come with their own set of nutritional knowledge that you have to brush yourself up on and become aware of. And they all have their own challenges that you have to make sure that you can overcome if you want to be able to thrive with this long term. The thing is, there are also these same challenges with a typical omnivorous diet too. So if you're eating meat and plants and everything, you still have to think about the quantity, quality, and availability of nutrients that you're getting in. So don't think that you're getting off any easier on that front. But when you're eating an omnivorous diet, you're at least setting yourself up in a slightly more advantageous position because you're at least not creating extra challenges for yourself by eliminating whole food groups in general. But let me tell you, when I used to do a lot of private coaching, it would be extremely rare for me to come across someone, even someone advanced who had been doing this for years as an athlete or a bodybuilder or anything like that. It was very rare for me to find somebody who was nailing absolutely everything from a macro and micronutrient perspective and truly thriving. Because the reality is, this stuff is hard, and it takes time to build up that knowledge over time and to become proficient in it. So let me end this little discussion with this. Don't buy into the hype of the latest diet trend just because you heard about some science or because some celebrity or diet book came out talking about how good this diet is. Instead, focus on improving your nutritional IQ around eating as a whole and nourishing your body as a whole. Then do that however you see fit and however you prefer. It really is that simple. It's simple, but not necessarily easy. Anyway, thank you all for watching this all the way through. Hope you enjoyed this and found something useful from it, and I will see you all next time.